All right, you all see the agenda? I'd like to start the process of developing a survey for members of Research Ethics Committee regarding biobanks. And these are the agenda items. You know, why are we doing, why do we hope to get out of a survey study? And I mean, what information do we want to get? And then we need to answer the question, well, what shall we assess in order to meet those goals? Think of it somewhat as the scientific objectives. Do we want to assess knowledge, their perceptions, attitudes, and what they actually are doing now? For example, what elements do they put in the informed consent study? Do they also require other issues regarding biobank research? And then in answering that, we could look at some other questionnaires that have been done previously. And I sent you one last night in my second email of a questionnaire from that article I had sent previously. And then we could start looking at the what kind of which countries will be involved, and start thinking about the sample size. I don't know if we get to that. I don't think that's really necessary for today. And I see this as a multi-step process involving, like, we're not going to come up with the actual questionnaire at the end of this session, but we'll have a framework in which to start developing the questions, which will circulate via email. So any questions about that? Feel free to unmute yourself.
Yes,
So far, no questions.
So far is good.
No questions.
No questions so far for me.
Nothing.
Yes.
Okay. All right. Good. Feel free to unmute yourself anytime. How come sometimes I feel like no one's around, no one's home? Let's see now. How come just wondering why I don't, oh, you all have your videos off. Oh, hey guys, turn on your videos. Do me a favor. Turn on your videos. Don't be shy. I should have made this a requirement.
I guess the girls need to wear a scarf or something before they turn on the videos.
Oh,
I don't have to.
Okay, because when you're in your homes, you don't wear the scarves.
Yes.
That's something to revisit. So someone's doing a lot of stuff back there. I'll put on the side the whole issue of videos because I think
The only issue with turning on the video is the
is the what?
The issue
It's
is
the speed of internet. It's just, yes, once we switch on the video, the voice starts cutting off. So
Have we done that? Have we tried that? I mean,
I know
yeah.
it becomes slower if you
What's
turn
that?
on the video.
when you turn on the videos, is it really slower?
it is.
Yeah.
Yes, pretty much, yes.
Pretty much. Okay. All right, because
But just because my internet is bad, it's nothing. It has nothing to do with the technology. It's just my internet is not like coping with the whole video streaming thing.
right. Okay. Well, that's good to know because if I plan on doing, putting on workshops and all that, then there should be a way to investigate for everyone to have decent internet. Because I think trying to replicate as much as possible the face-to-face experience, believe it or not, having videos on is much better. It's much better when everybody could see everybody.
Hi, everybody.
Okay, all right. So are you able to, so I guess I'm just trying to also see, now some people have their videos on. Oh, there we go. Okay. Let me just, right, because it really actually helps me as well to not to see faces, and then when someone talks, I mean, maybe it's just me being a visual person more than anything else, but I really think it helps the whole experience. So anyway, if we'll take the issue offline, if people need to upgrade to a better internet service, then let me know, and we'll try to get you up to speed with a better internet service. So anyway, enough of that. I now see enough faces to make me feel like I'm not alone. So the other thing is that there are other people on this call who are not part of the Middle East training program, and I just like to give a warm welcome to those other individuals, and thank you very much for joining and adding your expertise to our experience. And by all means, when you speak up, feel free to introduce yourself and tell us who you are. And again, thank you for joining. So having said all that, so let's start with the first agenda item. Why are we what do we hope to gain from doing a survey of IRB members?
Well, I personally would like to know how much they understand the concept of biobanking and issues associated with biobanking, ethical issues. I think that most IRB members at our institutions do not really know, details of the ethics of research ethics in general.
Well, that's okay. Research ethics in general,
Yeah.
But that's that could be a sub-focus. I mean, that would be another survey study. Now, what did you say early on? The first thing you said?
To know if IRB members know the concept of biobanking
Okay,
and issues associated with it. Yeah.
okay, the concept. So we're talking about knowledge, right?
Sure.
Okay, the concept of biobanking. Now let me ask, and other people, feel free to chime in at the appropriate time, like when someone pauses. Good internet etiquette. So in order to, they will be reviewing genetic research. So specifically, what concept of biobanking do they need to know?
Well,
I think
not,
the,
Go ahead.
I think the challenges, Professor Henry, they face while reviewing the biobanking research.
Well, yeah,
What are the challenges they face?
but they'll be reviewing genetic research. But now, I mean, I take it that's what you mean by biobanking research. Or is there something additional?
well, when I said concept of biobanking, I don't think that, well, some IRB members, I don't think they know what biobanks are. Even if they do, I don't think they know. Well, I'd like to know if they know of the issues associated with biobanks in terms of, you know, the returning research results, confidentiality, etc. Same
Okay,
thing with
well,
genetic research.
Okay, well, that's what I mean with genetic research. We have all those issues about ownership,
Sure.
Returning results to participants, and commercial profits, and data sharing, right?
Yeah.
So
Sure.
I guess what I'm getting at, they don't need to know about governance issues of biobanks, or I don't know. Maybe they do. What do you think?
I would agree on that point related to the governance issues because, for example, some EACs only reviewed like big clinical trials, and the genetic research was only a part of it, and it wasn't the core of the research that they are doing. So he didn't pay much attention to the issues that can, or the ethical challenges that can come up with genetic research, because from in their experience it was just a subsidiary part. So maybe they didn't think much about the points related to governance and as you were saying, and the ownership and all these matters, if they were just reviewing this part as part of a bigger research or something, and not, and maybe when it's presented separately as biobanks and biobanking research, they will start to see that maybe there are some points that they missed or that they were not aware of.
Okay. I mean, there's a lot of research that just involves collection of samples, which is important. Yes.
I think we should also tackle about the difference between reviewing biobanking, or what is different between biobanking research and other types of research. For example, the difference in the consent, the issues of who owns the samples, how they handle it. Usually when they just handle a request for ordinary research, they are just caring about that the consent is a consent that's talking about specific research. But for some RIC members who haven't dealt with biobanking or reviewing protocols, the difference between biobanking research and ordinary genetic research are reviewing. I think this is one important thing we have to.
What's the difference between biobanking research and genetic research? I'm trying to understand that.
If I'm just doing a single study, single genetic study, I'm just, it's one step I will collect. I have, for example, I will have a specific consent that includes the details of this research protocol. On the other hand, the broad consent and what the issues about it, it's biobanking consent. Usually they are not talking about the one issue protocol. I will use it for single use. The biobanking will store it. So the issues of ownership and other controlling issues. Usually REX members usually review protocols, for example, other research, master or PhD. It's for single or specific use. For biobanking, I think it will be quite different for them to understand the concept and handle the issues related to it. So I think that we have to see if they can understand this difference or not.
The difference between what?
Between, for example, the issue of the consent. For example, if they understand the difference between the broad consent used in biobanking and the specific consent used in a specific research protocol.
Okay, but if you're doing genetic research and collecting samples, okay, collecting and storing samples, you still have issues about broad consent, returning results, ownership, right?
I don't think these issues are very tackled in general. For example, when I applied for my PhD, I applied for a protocol. So what was REC members were interested in is the issue of the consent that entails the details of the protocol, the risks, and something like this. They didn't think about if I'm going to store the sample or use it in future research or not. They didn't think about it.
Right. Okay. So was your research biobanking research?
No. It was genetic. It was genetic research. It was genetic research on leukemia.
Right.
Yeah.
And they should have asked questions about broad consent and returning results and blah blah.
No. What they cared about is mainly the issue of the specific.
What I'm trying to say is that they should have.
Yeah. Maybe that we may ask about. Yeah, this awareness about these issues.
That's my point. My point is that genetic research and biobank research, we throw that term around so loosely, is really the same thing.
Okay.
That's my only point. Once I think the maybe it's better, maybe it'd be less confusing if we say biospecimen research instead of saying biobank research, because when we say biobank research, we're talking about collecting samples, right? And genetic research is the same thing, I think.
But are they aware of this? These REC members in our countries, are they aware about that we are talking about when we talk about when you talk about sample or biospecimen or genetic research, we are talking about biobanking? Will they understand the difference? This difference, or that we are talking about the same thing, but will they think about it as one entity?
Well, that's the point I'm trying to tease out here. Do they, if there's no difference between genetic research and biobank research in the sense that we're talking about collection and storage of samples for future unspecified research, what else do they need to know about biobanks? That's why I asked, do they need to know about the governance of biobanks?
Hello, Henry. My name is Shanuka Singh. I'm from South Africa. I'm doing a second PhD, don't ask why. And it's in the area of the ethical, legal, and social implications for biobanking research. To answer your question in terms of should we focus or should a REC focus on the governance of a biobank? And the answer is yes, because we do need to know, for example, in terms of the access and biospecimen or a biospecimen and data access committee, does it exist at a biobank or at a biobank level? And what kind of access control is in place for the movement of the samples, even when it comes to storage and sharing of the samples as well. So some of the challenges that we have in South Africa is again that when we talk about a biobank, it's a very structured facility of storing, sharing, storing, processing, sharing samples, etc. But then you also have biospecimen sharing that does not have this very formalized setting, which will be in a clinical setting, which would maybe in a laboratory setting, etc. And yet the ethical, legal, and social implications apply to any form of collection and storage. So those are the kind of challenges that we face in terms of, firstly, there is a lot of collecting and sharing that is occurring. Some of it is formalized, while some of it is not formalized. And from a REC perspective, how is it, what is it that a REC reviewer needs to look at? What are the different aspects that the REC reviewer needs to focus on? And in some cases, it's a case of, well, biobanking is a bit too specialized, so let's send it to someone who knows a little bit more about it. So there's definitely a need for REC capacity building in terms of what to look for in terms of the review process, especially when you're looking at research that is involving biosamples or biospecimens.
Okay, thank you for those thoughts. And I know that a lot of people believe that it's the REC who should be, actually, correct me if I'm wrong, part of the governance of biobanking, in the sense that I guess in some regions it's the REC that control access to the samples and review requests from researchers who want to have access to the samples. Is that correct?
So in South Africa, it's a little bit different. It may be different in other countries, but
Okay.
here we talk from a REC perspective is going to be about the approval of the study in terms of the review process. But a biobank should also have a biospecimen and access committee to set rules in place in terms of how sharing is going to occur. What are the conditions for sharing? For example, what would be the competence of the researchers that are involved? What types of data is going to be shared? What kind of agreements are going to be in place in terms of the shared data? Will it be shared with other researchers? So what are the restrictions on sharing? So these are things that a biobank actually needs to develop as well, but something that a REC member should be aware of and should be asking these questions.
Okay, so help me out here. When an REC reviews a protocol, and let's say let me make a distinction here. If they're reviewing a protocol that only involves the collection of the samples for future research, that is one step away from a protocol that wants to access samples in a repository. And so so let's say a REC is just reviewing a protocol that involves, let's say, some kind of genetic research that involves the collection of samples that will be stored for future use, for unspecified research. So do they need to be involved with issues involving what all of the stuff you just mentioned about access to samples and what kind of agreements? I mean, and an IRB doesn't need to ask questions about future data sharing agreements if they're just reviewing a protocol that's unless the research involves from the get-go multiple countries. I'm just thinking out loud here. So so let's say a research proposal involves genetic research among investigators from different countries from the get-go, and they're collecting samples. Should that IRB be asking questions about data sharing agreements?
In our context, yes.
Okay. All right, good. All right. Now, so that's definitely on the table. Let's say a protocol wants to access, well, if an investigator wants to access samples from a repository, wouldn't that repository or biobank have a specific REC that they do business with, for the lack of a better term?
It would depend in this case, because sometimes you do have, for example, if it is a major, repository, they probably could have their own ethics committee that's located. But in most cases in South Africa, the research is conducted or reviewed in most cases by university research ethics committees. You do have these big national research institutions that also have research ethics committees that are institutionally based.
Okay, all right. I think that that makes sense. So for example, I'm looking at one of the papers I sent out last night. It says a survey of European, this survey specifically targeted biobank professionals on the challenges of biobank research. So they were looking specifically at people who are working or interacting with biobanks. So that's a specific type of study. But in our case, we're not. You guys tell me, from Jordan and Egypt and Morocco and Sudan, is there research being done on samples from biobanks?
I've seen a similar case to what was Shinoko mentioning, but it wasn't done on the samples stored in a biobank. It was done on samples already stored in the pathology department of one of the institutes. And when the investigator wanted to have access to these samples to conduct research, all what he needed was the department approval and the ethics committee approval. But when there was a similar case with a multi-center study that involves other countries outside of Egypt, and they wanted access to these samples to do some sort of genetic research. Then the ethics committee refused and started asking about whether we will hear back from the sponsor or not, whether we will there will be a return of the results or not. So when it was just confined to an investigator at the site, the process was much easier. And I think this is what was Ahmed referring to earlier when he was saying on the PhD or in the PhD thesis, there is much more easier access for the specimens already stored at the institute,
Right.
whether they had
Right.
whether it was in the pathology department or another one, because the ethics committee doesn't ask much questions about sharing the data and who owns the result and return of the results. But when it's
Right,
sent to
yeah.
an external
I agree with all that. So all I'm trying to say is that what I'm getting at is that I don't want to confuse this survey study by putting in calling it a biobank survey. We could definitely explain what a biobank is, but when we talk about the concept of biobanks, I think we could get to where we want to go if we just look at what are the issues involved with collecting, storage, and doing future unspecified research on samples that also includes data sharing. And I think, Mamoon, I think that's where you were going at as well.
Sure.
And I mean, again, they don't need to know specifically what the ins and outs of a repository. I don't know. I have to think about this some more, but I'm just thinking that the term biobank research is could be a confusing concept because we're talking about two different things. A biobank is a repository, an entity. It doesn't do research. In fact, a biobank in and of itself, a lot of biobanks don't do research. Having said that, I remember reading recently a recent paper about biobanks in the US, and there's so many different types of biobanks. And we're trying to be too specific when we use one term that exists for many different entities: private biobanks, commercial, disease-oriented biobanks, population biobanks. It's just overwhelming. But anyway, so not to belabor the point, I agree with what everybody has said. We need to for sure know that knowledge about what goes in the informed consent and about
Data sharing.
yeah, data sharing, right? Okay, and what else? Well, I guess. What's that?
Confidentiality.
I'm sorry?
Confidentiality.
Oh, well, yeah, that's in the informed consent. I mean, I don't want to go through all the elements of informed consent. I mean, what needs to be in the informed consent, and there's been a lot of studies done about IRB practices, what they actually do. And so actually this gets to P, their practices. If they have reviewed genetic research, what have they actually done, right? What I'm getting at is we have, K, A, P, and so we want the knowledge. We also want to know what they actually do. So in the survey that I sent out, they actually asked, a set of questions. What information is provided in the informed consent procedure? And so they said, and the responses was, well, yeah, let me, where, oh, yeah, there we go. So, are you able, do I need to make that bigger? Okay, so they ask, what information is provided in the informed consent procedure? Is provided, not provided? I don't know. That's where the end category is I don't know, right? So they were asking about the practices. Now, the next question,
Yeah.
okay, in your opinion, what information should be provided? Okay, and should be is not essential, and this is I don't know. So what information should be provided in the informed consent? Okay, the purpose, possibility of recontact for additional samples, returning results, data, sharing data samples with non-commercial research partners, with commercial partners, with parties in other EU countries and non-EU countries, and then I have other, okay? And then they have which sample data use is currently covered by the informed consent. And they have multiple answers here. So in this survey, they asked, what's your practice now, and what do you think should be provided? Okay, and so that's a way of getting at. Now, is that something we want to do as well? Should we ask what is currently being done? Are there enough RECs who have, will they actually remember when they get a survey and they ask, has your IRB reviewed genetic research? And if they check off yes, and we ask which of the following are provided in the informed consent form? I mean, should we do the same thing that was done in that survey?
So I like what it's how the survey how it's the format of the survey and the type of questions. I like it. The thing is, maybe I have a bit of a dilemma. I know that at the Cancer Center they have their own biobank, so they are very familiar with all issues related to biobanking or genetic research related to biobanking, to biospecimens, stored biospecimens. But the IRB that I serve at the hospital, they know of genetic research, but not necessarily biobanking or biospecimen research, maybe.
Right, okay. Well, I mean, when you say at the hospital, you mean your hospital?
Yeah, at the university.
Okay, well, are they going to be in the future involved with specimen research?
Well, well, okay. I'm trying to. I'm thinking loud, maybe.
Sure.
Maybe I shouldn't.
Everything is confidential.
Excuse me.
Everything is confidential.
Yeah. I like the survey. I like the way the questions are formatted. I think it goes well with biobanks in Jordan.
Okay, people from Egypt, Morocco, Sudan, and those our colleagues from South Africa. Have you done surveys before in South Africa regarding sample research?
Yes, I have. Professor Kimantri Mudli and I did a study in 2016, which we published, which looked at, it was researcher perspectives, and it also included REC member perspectives as well, looking at their understanding of ethical, legal, and social implications of biobanking research. Currently, like I said, I'm involved in the PhD work where my first phase also looked at stakeholder perspectives. And there has been one or two other studies that have been conducted in this area.
But specifically involving REC members.
Yes, REC members were part of the cohort.
Oh, part of the stakeholders.
Yes.
I see. And you were asking about the knowledge, attitudes, practices.
So in my current study, what I did was I looked mainly at their understanding. So it was more a case of, tell me what do you think about the state of biobanking in the country? What do you think could be some of the ethical challenges? What could be some of the legal challenges? So those were those very broad stroke questions that were asked. But these were interviews.
Interviews, okay.
Yes.
All right, so I'm just trying to tease this out just a little bit more. You were asking about their understanding. So were you asking about their knowledge or what they think, what their perception of what is happening?
A lot of it had to do with their perspectives, looking at their perceptions. Some of when in my results, I actually found a lot of there were gaps in knowledge, so that came out in the perceptions and in the perspectives that were being presented.
Okay, and
but I didn't ask,
yeah,
I didn't ask a specific knowledge question as such.
Well, yeah, you were being open-ended for an interview. Yes, right. And so, actually, if I'm sure, I think I have almost everything that Kamantri has published
Yes.
in my file somewheres. But if you could actually send me the specific title of the study you're referring to, that would be great. And in fact, it might be good as we develop this quantitative research to try to take advantage of your qualitative research and to when developing this survey. Because, well, this is part of why we do a literature review. Now, let me move along. So while I still have, what I want to get at is the second part of the agenda. So specifically, again, so here, my first question, what do we want to assess? And Mahmoud, you basically wanted the knowledge, okay. And then we're looking at practices. Now, let me tease out something here. Now, knowledge and practices are simple, I think, well, even though we spent a lot of time on it, so maybe it's not that simple. Now, do we want to know their attitudes about anything, about genetic research or sample research? Well, let me,
say that again.
do we want to know their attitudes? So let me give an example. Well, we may want to know their attitudes about the type of informed consent, right? Whether it should be broad or tiered.
What type of model what type of consent model is preferred?
Yes, right. So now, if they, if they're not doing a whole lot of reviewing of genetic research, I'm just thinking out loud as well. If they have reviewed genetic research that had a broad consent, I guess you could say, well, then the attitude is broad consent is the way to go. But so I guess what I'm trying to say, if their practice is broad consent, then should we assess their attitudes about broad consent?
I think we should.
Okay, I think so too.
Yeah.
Because I don't think they have done enough of this type of research. Maybe they have a certain attitude that hasn't been voiced yet, or I don't think anything has been etched in stone. I'm also thinking about return of results. if what you said before is largely true, they haven't, like what Ahmed said, they haven't really thought about this yet, right? Then we have to assume that a lot of people haven't thought about it. If they have, then they already have a certain attitude, right? So we want to know their attitudes about recontact, returning results, data sharing, right?
Yeah, and also about sample sharing as well. If they
Yes,
are
right.
if they prefer that, again, that what we asked previously, patients and investigators, they will share, they prefer that protocols that involve sharing of samples with other countries. Do they review these protocols? You know, they think there is specific limitations on this kind of protocols or something.
Right, yes, right. So we want their attitudes about that. I'll ask a question, and in an effort to cause more confusion here. So this survey is asking for opinion. What's the difference between opinion and attitudes?
There is a big difference between the two.
Okay, fantastic, great.
Because with
I'm
opinion-
actually glad you said a big difference. So help us here.
Okay, so your opinion basically is your perspective, which is your worldview, but your attitude is very much determined by your actions. So you may have a worldview, but then it may clash with your actions. So that's the big difference between your attitude and your opinion.
Right, yeah, I largely agree with that. Now, a lot of people, as you know, think opinions and attitudes are the same, but I think one is being somewhat lazy when they say that. Now,
I think also that the opinion is something that I express, but the attitude is has the factor of the challenges that I face. I mean, if I think that the ethics committee should do 1, 2, 3, but my actual attitude will be subject to what the ethics committee can actually do and the resources that they have and the level of training that the members have and their capacity and everything. So the opinion doesn't get to be influenced by the real life obstacles or the challenges that they actually have.
no, I do not agree with that, because I think if you're expressing what someone actually could do, that's reflecting on someone else's action, but not yours. I think the opinion, as was mentioned, I'm not sure I would have used the word worldview, though I think that does capture a belief, but one may not, as you said, I agree, attitude is more reflective of something that will cause you to act on something. So for example, you may have an opinion as to whether a certain policy will be good for a community. But whether you think that policy should be instituted. You may have other reasons why you don't think it should be instituted for that community, and that's your attitude. So again, you may think something is good, but it's not necessarily your attitude that it should be instituted. So, and an attitude, the other way to think about it is that it's holds an effective construct. It tells you whether you like it or not. Obviously, if you like something, you're more prone to act on that. Whereas an opinion doesn't reveal anything, well, I shouldn't say anything, but it doesn't, well, let me just say, an attitude is more proximal to your action than an opinion. So they're closely aligned, but I agree there's a difference. So having said that, these questions here, in your opinion, what information should be provided? So I'm sorry, I know Kamantri just joined, but your colleague, where is she? So I'm sorry, your name again, Sergey, or?
Are you looking for Shanuka?
Oh, Shanuka, yes. Is she still on the line?
I'm here.
All right, so Shanuka, help us out here on this survey. In your opinion, what information should be provided to participants in the informed consent form? And it says the purpose and objectives of the research, possibility of returning individual research results. Are those opinions or attitudes?
Those are opinions.
Okay, explain.
For example, here it's basically, so you're asking what kind, should your study, should the purpose and the objectives be stated up front? There could be other information that could be provided. So yeah, to me, it's an opinion. But if you come down and if you talk about I would still say opinions.
Okay. I'm just I'm reflecting on this word should. I think in the scheme of things, whether we call these opinions or attitudes may not make much of a difference. Every time I look at this, I go in a different direction on whether their opinions or attitudes. I'm looking at that word should, and I'm just thinking that whether this is more towards action. This is something, if they think it should be provided, then they're actually going to do it. But anyway, I don't want to tease this out too much. But I think regardless, I just wanted to throw out the possible distinction between opinions and attitudes, and I do agree with you that there is a big difference, though. Sometimes they're pretty close sometimes. So anyway, what I'm getting at is that so we do want to know their attitudes / opinions, and the double is in the details. Maybe as we develop the survey, we'll have a better idea about attitudes and opinions, but we do want to know their attitudes about broad consent, what should be in the informed consent form, data sharing, return of results, opinions, and all that. And again, we want to know their actual practice if they have practiced it already. Now, let me bring up the concept of perception. Do we want to know perceptions? Perceptions is, do they know what is happening now, right?
I don't know if it's important.
Okay.
To know their perception. I'd like to focus more on practice and attitudes. I like the idea of adding scenarios and see how they would act upon it. But we can talk about this later.
Oh, okay. Yeah, okay. No, that's an interesting thought. Yeah, and I like scenarios. That tends to increase the right, the length of the survey.
Well, it adds more maybe strength or credibility to the practice and attitude questions.
I agree. I agree. And but we could definitely add some scenarios to help flesh out, to help to ensure their understanding of the of the concept. So while I'm on this survey here, they also ask, they said, in your opinion, when do you think reconsent is required? I'm not sure if data are to be used for a study in a different field, if the field changes. I'm not sure if I actually understand all of this. That must be European specific. I don't know. But I'll show you in a survey we developed for investigators. We have something similar to this about reconsent. It says here, in your opinion, besides the information given in the initial IC, how should participants be further informed about sample and data use? I see no need for further information. Biobanks should inform donors about research activities performed with samples and data, newsletters or reports. You know, this question may assess the internal validity of what they thought about broad consent. If you believe, correct me if I'm wrong, I'm thinking if you believe in broad consent, then you would check off this, right? Well, yeah, that has been conducted. Oh, okay, online, I see. All right, I understand this question. Actually, I like that question. So they're talking about something similar to dynamic consent where participants could access the website and find out what kind of research has been or are being done with their samples. So actually, we could delve more into a question like this, but I think that this actually, we haven't talked too much about community engagement, but a question like this, where you're keeping the community informed about what's happening, I think that's an important concept to put in this survey, because we have found Ahmed, Mamoon, and I don't know if Maha is on this call, but when we were interviewing biobank managers, when we asked about community participation, right? Most of the stuff we got back was, oh yeah, we have a lay person on the IRP, right? There was no broad concept of engaging communities. I think that's something to, connect with them. So actually, I look at question 14 at your leisure, but I actually like that question. Let's see, what else? Oh, here they have, does the current IC cover the possibility to link data with data from other sources? What do you think of that question? That's like participating in genome-wide association studies. That's a specific question about data sharing.
Yeah.
Right? And well, they have, I don't know. Now, yeah, overall, how would you evaluate the informed consent you are currently using? It's sufficient with benefit from more improvements, benefit from major changes.
What does that question mean? What is meant by you're currently using? We're talking about RSC members.
Yes, right.
So, well, in our case, every ethics committee, well, no, I know there is a standard consent form for the Cancer Center, but for all other centers or RSCs, they do not require a specialized or specific form. Okay.
Right.
So we're talking about a standardized form, right? We're talking about a standardized form for each.
It's more or less the same thing in Egypt.
What do you mean it's more or less the same thing?
I mean, the ethics committee doesn't have a standardized informed consent that everyone is using, except, for example, for Cairo University. These are the ones that have their own template for the informed consent, and you have to fill it in and use it. So I don't know if this question will be like applicable to what we are trying to investigate, because the other ethics committees doesn't have this standard that that the question here is asking about. And I think that's the same what Dr. Ma'moon was saying. So
I agree. I think that question is too
And
open.
yet, yes, also in Sudan, we don't have standardized IC.
Well, I don't think this question actually.
I think this question could be about the type of IC.
Well, I don't think that this question presupposes having a standardized informed consent. I think, but having said that, I think that would be a great question for an interview study, okay? Where someone could elaborate on what they mean. Whether, you know, I think it would benefit from some improvements. Well, all right, what type of improvements? So I agree. Now, if you were seeking information on how to.
Could we go back to question 15? Because it's also talking about the current informed consent.
What, 15?
15. It's talking again. It's talking about the current informed consent. So
Okay.
if we say that there is no template available, so again, this question is talking about an existing template.
Okay, well, you could we could leave this out, and we could say, in your opinion, or your attitude, do you think that well, we could do it two ways. We could say, do you think that data from sample research should be linked with data from other sources? And forget about the specifics of informed consent.
Okay.
So that's more like data sharing with other registries, and then we could say they, you know, link to other sources in other countries as well. That would be a good question for that. So all right, good. So here, the question 17. Where would you search for more information on how to improve your informed consent? And well, it looks like a good question. I don't know if, well, getting back to the purpose of doing this research, we right? I mentioned this before. We want to see if we could change practice about how RECs review research, right? And I'm not sure if that's such an important question. You know, and I just thought of something, right? Is it that we're doing this survey because we want to know what's the current practice, what's the current knowledge and attitude, and we're starting off with somewhat what we think according to most what most people think, even though there's still controversy on some issues, but we think what might be considered the current norms in sample research, and we want to change, enhance practice, right? Is that fair to say? What do you, I mean, why do surveys? What do you think?
Yeah, because we ask about knowledge and to improve the process.
Right, yeah,
Yes,
okay.
exactly. That's the point of gaining knowledge to benefit from it, to do something in a better way, identify a gap and work on it.
Well, yeah, we want to change what people do, right? So, so when we look at acts, you know, what influence, how do you know how somebody will act on something? Okay, well, we want to know their attitudes. We want to know their opinions. We want to know their perceptions and their knowledge. And some people say we also want to know their intentions. Also, we also want to know what norms of well, their perception, well, what norms they follow, but that's more like in other types of behavior, like responsible conduct and research, what they believe is to be considered normative behavior. Attitudes are most proximal to actions. I mean, knowledge is important, but you don't actually know how someone will act until you know their attitudes about their knowledge. But knowledge is important. So anyway, I think what I'm trying to get at is when we finalize the final survey, we have to look at every question and see how important it is in terms of making change. So I think a question like this, where will they go to seek more information? It's an interesting question, but if I want to shorten my survey, I would leave that question out. You know, in the survey we did for lay people for biobank research, we had content experts rate the questions, right? If you remember that process, and you know, good question, bad question, blah blah blah. So that was a very good process to have the opinions of the content expert. But anyway, so let's see. Well, here, what forms of ethical legal support would you appreciate? Well, I don't think we need that. Oh, yeah. In which ways are biobank participants, donors involved in activities? So they're asking what is happening now. I think I think we may want to ask a question. in which ways should biobank donors be involved in activities of the biobank? What do you think of that?
Well, I think we should ask a prior question.
Yeah,
Does your center have a biobank? If no, then we can jump to attitudes.
okay.
Okay, if they do, then we can ask them about current practice.
Well, I mean, would they know the current practice of their associated biobank? I mean, that's what we're asking the biobank managers in our interview study.
I know at the Cancer Center they do, because every research that passes, that requires biobank, it goes through the IRB.
Right, yeah, but do the IRB members at King Hussein, do they know how the communities are being engaged?
Well, I assume that they do, but I don't know.
Yeah, right. Well, let's hold that thought.
Okay. Okay.
All right, so what obstacles have you encountered in relationship to your biobank activities? Well, again, they're asking biobank professionals, so that's why they asked that question. I think, well, I think the other questions are more about biobank professionals. Let me let me do one last thing. In regards to developing the survey. What I put up is the survey we currently have for investigators. Because I think some of the questions we asked investigators should be asked to REC members as well. Let's see. Oh, which, by the way, I think we're doing a really good job with the enrollment in that study, the investigator study, and I want to say Jordan is leading the way. So thank you very much for your efforts. Okay. So anyway, in that questionnaire, we have, well, yeah, we have, you know, all this information about the consent form, right? So that should be similar. I mean, what I'm trying to say is we don't have to reinvent the wheel so much. Okay, and oh, wait a second. I'm sorry. I have the. Oh, I see. I'm sorry. This was the.
And the RSC.
Yeah, right. Well, I'm getting. Yeah, let me. I could do this faster. So, in the REC survey that distributed. We have this whole section about consent forms, so I think that's good. And then we have this question about broad consent, but I think we could ask it in the same way we did it for the investigator study, right? Attitude on the type of consent, broad consent or tiered consent, or, well, that's interesting. I have to admit a major fault of my own. I put down attitudes, and then I say, I have no opinion. All right, so there you go. Okay, thank you very much. Okay, so, and then if you choose broad consent, and then we have a whole section about data sharing. And I think we should ask the same questions of the REC members, right? The same thing with the investigators. I think return results, the same thing. Let's see. Now here we say ethical review of research. I like your opinion, attitude. So you see, I'm conflicted as well. And we could, well, this is something similar to in that European survey. It said, what's in your informed consent and what do you think should be in your informed consent? So let me ask you something. They put down, they had put down as a response, and should be provided in the IC, is not essential, I don't know. So they used a 3-point Likert scale, essentially. So here, very important, somewhat neutral, somewhat unimportant, very unimportant. I guess maybe we should have further discussions. Samer is not on this call, but what do you think? Do you think it's, I have to think more about this myself, but the European survey, which is obviously a published study, just had should be in the IC, is not essential. I don't know. Is that a better way? That makes, well, just let's think about that.
Okay.
But here they're interesting. They put down I don't know, which, as we discussed previously, is different from having a neutral opinion,
Yes,
right?
that's right.
Yeah, so that's interesting. Oh, and here are our questions about reconsent. So, I mean, again, I think this is, we should ask the same questions of the REC members. Actually, the more we ask the same questions of the REC members that we do of investigators, it will enhance our ability to compare the responses. between the two groups.
Can I ask a question, please?
Yes.
In fact, maybe we, for sometimes we will have the same person as investigator and also as a IRB member. So if we have include already some persons as investigator, should we exclude them from the second IRB investigations study?
I think the short answer is yes.
So they could answer both.
No, I'm saying, yes, they should be. Oh, I'm sorry. Did you say included or excluded?
Exclude. The
Yes,
question,
I
should
think
we exclude them?
yes.
Okay.
I don't think, no double dipping.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
All right, good question. Thank you. So I think the, where is, well, I'm looking at the survey for the investigators. I think the we didn't ask the investigators about what should be in the informed consent, which is fine, but we should ask obviously the REC members about informed consent, similar to the European survey. And then, you know, we already did the heavy lifting for the survey for investigators. And we put all that stuff in about return of results, broad consent, data sharing, and I don't know if we want to add a few more questions, but I think we should plagiarize ourselves as much as possible with permission. Okay.
I think there, Professor.
Yes.
I think there should be a question about the MTA for the REC members.
Yes, you know, I was just
MTA.
thinking about that. Thank you. Right, yes, no, I agree with that. I was just thinking about that as well. More so than investigators. Yes, right. They the REC people are our first line of defense for ensuring
Yes, they
good
should
data.
have
Yeah.
detailed information about the MTA, not like the investigators.
Yes, right. I agree. Good point. So, yeah, let me write a note. I think, by the way, there's a way I could, I think, share these whiteboards with you. Okay. I mean, you know, paper size. Okay. I agree. So what else? I think the in terms of knowledge, I don't want to keep on returning to the first point. What are we? We're mainly talking about knowledge about in the informed consent form. Any other types of knowledge they should know about genetic research? I guess what I'm trying to ask is, when they review genetic research, what kind of, and something tells me there might be another small body of information they should know about genetic research. What do you think? I can't put my finger on anything specific right now. You know, we have a few questions for investigators about harms to community, social harms from breach of confidentiality. Well, something to think about, whether there's other knowledge type questions that's needed. So I think this is the, well, here we have communication of results, access. All right, well, I just have this, oh, I thought I changed this. Oh, I put up the wrong one. Okay, so let me, all right, so I think we have a basic foundation here. The goal is to change behavior, and we got mainly practice, attitudes, knowledge, perceptions. I agree. We are more interested in their opinions, attitudes, and knowledge, and what they're doing now. And we looked at one other questionnaire, and the questionnaire we have, and we'll look at the work that Comantry and Sanuka are doing in South Africa. Very, very good work there, and see other questionnaires are available. And then, so I'll coalesce the different surveys we've been looking at, and we'll try to finalize a survey for REC members. Other thoughts?
I have none.
What's that?
No, I have none.
Oh, okay. All right, great. So, while I have you all on the call,
I have a question about the I have a question about the data sheet.
yes.
Question: should we make a distinction between data sharing and sample exportation, or should we treat them as one theme, data sharing?
Yes.
Because when we talk about exportation, it's sharing with another country, but sharing refer to sharing with other institutions within the same country.
My answer to your first question is yes, but I think that and in the survey for investigators, we did make a distinction between data sharing and sample sharing, mainly because Egypt, as well as other countries, don't like to export samples.
But here in Sudan, we do a lot of exportation of samples.
Okay, no, that's fine. But I'm saying, but some countries don't. But that doesn't necessarily mean they don't export data. And there was a question in the EU survey that said about linking the data with other sources of data, other registries. So I think we have to decouple the two, data and samples. It's
Sample.
like
Okay.
asking forgot the name, a double edge or a compound question. So we should separate it out for sure. The two questions. Okay.
Henry,
Yes.
I think the data and sample issue is important because are you familiar with the Sanger story around samples and data?
Which story?
Sanger, the Wellcome Sanger Institute in the UK.
Which the Wellcome
Okay,
Trust or
So yeah, Wellcome Trust sponsor, it's called Wellcome Trust, Wellcome Sanger Institute. So what happened is
okay.
there was some research done in South Africa at a number of different institutions. So from the Cape Town site, there was a established collaboration between the USA and South Africa. So samples and data left Cape Town and went to the USA, to an institution. From there, some of the samples were sent to the UK, to the Sanger Institute, for research purposes only. But then while the samples and the data were sitting at Sanger, there is a story around alleged commercialization of those samples to form, to develop chips, gene chips, right? With a private entity, Thermo Fisher. So all of this is in the public domain. Sanger denies the commercialization, but they did write to Stellenbosch University, offering to share some royalties or something of that nature. Now, the thing is that nobody had consented to commercialization. So the research participants had not consented to commercialization, and the researchers did not anticipate commercialization along the way. And to make it even more complicated, Sanger then apparently sent data to another institution in South Africa. So this time it was data sharing, but there was no data sharing agreement between the two South African institutions. So in this respect, I think it's important to look at data sharing agreements separately and material transfer agreements, and also to think about commercialization, because in the context of biobanking or data or sample sharing, one often does not explicitly consent participants for commercialization. And I think that needs to be considered. We have a publication coming out soon in Developing World Bioethics, and I will send it to you where we discuss this issue.
Okay. Yeah. Yes. I agree with you 100%. So I think let me just make let me just yep. So on our survey, we do say in the consent form whether donors will share in any commercial profits, but that's donors. We need to, in the data sharing, sample sharing section, I agree with you with the data, well, with the sharing issue, that needs to be upfront and center about the commercialization for sure. Thank you for sharing that story. And I think that, well, again, that's a reason to be doing this survey. So I appreciate, I'll look forward to your article in Developing World Bioethics for sure. Okay, good, great. Well, let me ask my colleague, Kamantri, when we finish developing the survey with Kamantri, with you and your colleagues, could we ask you to serve as the content expert and look at our survey and give your opinion? We don't want your attitude about our survey. We only want your opinion.
Sure. So you know, Shanuka's doing her PhD on biobanking, and I'm not sure if she told you, but she's developed an online training course in biobanking.
Oh, really?
Yeah, ethical, legal, and social issues related to biobanking. Shanuka?
Yes, so we developed 5 modules as part of the biobanking course that looked at an introductory module that looked at governance in biobanking, informed consent, data sharing, and stakeholder engagement.
I say, is that asynchronous online?
Yes, it's an online short course.
I see, and it's offered as a university course or just something for your training program?
So it is basically a continuous professional development course. So it's something for professionals that will be, and the course is housed at Stellenbosch University.
I see. So my next question is, how could we access it?
You will have to wait a few months, I would think. Sorry. Because we still, so what I'm doing is that I'm using participatory action research to reflect, go back, tweak the modules and get them ready.
Okay.
So in fact, I just like completed sorting out phase 2, which was getting the feedback from the reviewers, etc. So it's going to go out now for the 3rd round of review, and then once we get to all that data that comes in, then it will be open to the public in general.
Oh, excellent. Very good. I will wait anxiously to see that. That sounds like well, it doesn't sound like it is a wonderful idea. So and badly needed. So that's great. So I really appreciate this coalescence of ideas between and sharing between our 2 programs, Kamantri and Shanuka. I appreciate your input for sure. Thank you very much for joining. So I think let me wrap up. Let me I'll have a link to this session, and I'll start drafting our thoughts into the actual questions, and then we'll have another session, where we could look over, hopefully a shorter session, we'll look over the actual questionnaire itself and really tweak it question by question and rate the importance of each question, and then we'll do the same thing as we did for the other surveys. We will look towards validating the survey as well, and then we'll have another project going on with our biobanking research. Okay, good. Any other remaining thoughts?
I do have a question about what we first talked about early, the first thing we talked about, which is the difference between biobanking research and genetics research. Just want to know what we have agreed on.
Well, I think what we agreed on is that I think that we agreed on having everything that we have agreed on, which is, you know, we talked about informed consent and opinion questions / attitude questions, and I think I think what we mean by biobank research, that's a term that encompasses the concepts we have already discussed about MTA agreements,
Okay.
which is, you know, I do agree. There's genetic research and then there's genetic research, but
Yes.
we don't we're not interested in that genetic research that's looking at who knows what. Maybe Karima could help us, but you know, the genetic research looking at certain mutants, alleles, and blah blah blah.
Okay.
We're looking at the type of research that involves returning results, community engagement, MTAs, and I think that's what, when at the end of the day, and it is the end of the day, more so for you than for me, when we talk about biobank research, we are talking about all these other issues that extends beyond the specific genetic research itself. So,
Yes.
so I do think once we flesh it out, I think that the word biobank incorporates all those ideas.
Sure. Okay. Okay.
Okay. So
Sounds
okay. I'm glad we fleshed it out.
good.
Okay. All right. Good. Great. So thanks for joining. I think we're past 2 hours, so it's I'm glad we were all active in this session. It has helped a lot. So anyway, so enjoy the rest of the evening, and I hope everyone continues to remain safe. And so everyone stay healthy. Okay.
Right.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you.
Bye, Henry.
Bye.
Have a good night.
Thanks,
you.
Commander
Bye.
Sanuka. Thank you.
Goodbye.
Bye bye.